Welcome to Blueprint CFO Presents, our every other Friday podcast featuring future focused entrepreneurs. Our guest today is a very special one, Jeff Clark, CEO and President of J Squared General Contractors. How are you doing there, Jeff?
Good afternoon, Mr. Downs. Good afternoon, everybody.
I'm excited to have Jeff on the show because J Squared General Contractors was our first client when I started Blueprint CFO in October of 2019. And I've known Jeff for a long time, so it's very exciting to have him be participating in the program here.
Well, it's great to see what you've done too.
Yeah. So just before we start, a little thing about Blueprint CFO. We're a fractional CFO and outsourced accounting firm. We work with our clients to create a profitability roadmap for the future, and we help them stay on course by meeting with them weekly and monthly to review the progress we're making on the plan and see what we need to do to achieve their financial goals. So, Jeff, question number one, tell us a little bit about J Squared.
We are a commercial ground up and tenant improvement general contractor based out of Orange, California. We'll basically service anywhere in California if the client is good enough. We do everything from small office tenant improvement to large ground up properties. We also do a lot of government contracted work. We have work the ports of LA. We're looking at a job at the Port of Stockton. We do quite a bit of work for the big horizontal contractors when they do, like if they've got a project that, let's just say hypothetically, they got to take a road and put it in point A, and then it's got to go to point B. If there's any buildings in the way, they hire us to do it. So we've been doing a lot of that over the last couple of years. That landed us at the LA airport for about a year and a half.
One of the exciting projects you did at the airport was the USO Center, which was pretty cool, and I got to go there and see the opening ceremony and all that, and it's pretty awesome to do that for the veterans
military. You know what, Jim, you're right. I would have to say that was probably J Squared's most significant project to date. It's one that I'm very, very proud of. We took the existing Bob Hope USO facility. They were located in two construction trailers, and at that iconic theme building. And if folks don't know what that is, that's the funky looking building that looks like a satellite when you first walk in, when you first drive into LAX. We moved the Bob Hope USO into the ground floor of that. It's a 7,500 square foot TI. And it has everything from a full-blown kitchen to a game room. It has a movie theater in it, and it's a midpoint for our troops. If they're being shipped out, they will typically stay there before they go. When they come back, they stay there. Their families can stay there. It was a job that we teamed up with Griffith Companies on, and it still is to this day a very important special project for us. The faces on those young men and women, the soldiers that came off that bus that first day, can't put a price on that. It was a special time.
Sure. Yeah. Yep. So, if somebody's out there looking to do some building of something, why would they pick J Squared? What makes the company special?
Well, I have to say, Jim, my people, we're a small shop, but we do a lot of big high profile work, and all of my people here, they all come from bigger companies, and here they play a significant role at J Squared. So I don't run this place with an iron fist. It is a collaborative group of people for sure. We're builders first and foremost. So we do our best to build projects and meet clients' expectations. I feel like we've done a pretty good job of it over the years. Most of our work is negotiated from return clients. And I just, my field superintendents and my project managers do an excellent job.
And many of them have worked with you for years and years, right?
Yeah, most of our field came from a company that I used to work for before I came here.
So that leads me into the next. Yeah, go ahead.
Other than, during the COVID situation when we had to get slow, I can't recall off the top of my head, Jim, anybody that's actually quit working for J Squared.
Yep, and I've been along with you for a lot of those times, and I don't remember anybody either. So
yeah,
pretty awesome.
So, I think people come here and they find a home here, which is what I've always wanted.
Yeah, it's kind of like a family.
It is. When I started this, as you know, Jim, I was a field superintendent for a lot of years, and I worked for big companies and small companies. And the one common thing that I noticed, no matter where I went, was this massive disconnect between the field and their office. And they all started when you first worked there that, oh yeah, we all get along and this and this and that. And then you learn very quickly that it's almost like the field superintendents are second-class citizens to everybody else. They've got to use the back door and they've got their own special quarters. And I never understood that concept. If it weren't for guys that get up at 3 or 4 in the morning and want to drive for 2 hours and then drive home, the people in the office really wouldn't have anything to do. So without field, construction companies don't work. And so we put a lot into our superintendents. I mean, they're the main focus of how J Squared operates. In the office, we're always staying up on the latest and greatest in safety measures. We just made a pretty large investment in the new hard hats that are out now, that have tracking systems in them. So we give our people just about everything they could possibly have, along with training to succeed.
That's great. So you mentioned you work for bigger companies, and I can't remember the story, but what made you quit and start your own company? Because that's kind of risky.
Well, there was a couple different reasons. The one was the one that I just explained, which was the disconnect between the field and the office. And I just always kind of felt that it didn't have to be that way. A lot of things that would go on that I'd watch happen, it just seemed to me that they didn't have to be that way. You could just treat people like people and they would do what you needed them to do.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it was I distinctively remember sitting on a project. It was a Sunday, and I was in the construction trailer with 4 other senior level superintendents. And the one gentleman looked over at the general superintendent that was on the job and said that he wasn't going to work next Saturday because his grandson had a baseball game. And in that same sentence, he said, I missed my son's baseball games because I was always on a job site, and I'm not going to miss my grandson's. And right then and there, the bell went off in my head that as much as I love being a superintendent, this is not the life I want. And I don't want that for my people. So we do some big work, but we don't do work that I know will run my people into the ground. There's not enough money out there to make it worth it to have my supers working 7 days a week. It will not happen at J Squared. We won't take that kind of work.
That's a powerful story, obviously.
To me, Jim, it seems like a simple concept.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, and I think even in the beginning, when you first came along, you were pretty shocked at the amount of money that I would spend on things like our company trucks and the gear for the guys and all that kind of stuff. And
the logos on the trucks, and they had to be a certain way. And everything was first class.
Yeah. And I did that for a number of different reasons, but the main one was I wanted our men and our guys to be proud of where they work. And I wanted them understanding that, you're not just a number over here. You're a valued person, and your input matters. So, if you feel like we should do this, then let's talk about it. If you feel like we should do that, then let's talk about it. And if things aren't working, then let's talk about it. It's pretty hard when you're asking guys to do what superintendents do. They get up at, 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning. They're out of the door at 4. A lot of them are driving to Los Angeles, maybe San Diego, Riverside, depending on, where they live. Although we try to keep our guys within where they live, but sometimes it just doesn't work. And then those guys also sit in traffic on the way home. And being a superintendent is a very thankless job. And nobody ever seems to understand that it's really the superintendent that ran that work, because superintendents don't get invited to owners' meetings. They don't typically get invited to the hoopla ceremonies that go on afterwards. That's usually, they're usually off onto another job at that point.
Yeah, right.
And so, you learn pretty quickly as a super that you're only as good as your last job. And that's not how I feel at all.
That's cool.
So, my superintendents are the most important staff we have. And all of my staff knows that. I tell the girls up front, Jim, all the time that if a superintendent calls the office and they need something, okay, typically it's because they are in a hurry and they need it fairly quickly. So I do not want you putting that person on hold and then dialing the extension of whoever it is they were looking for, letting that extension beep a few times because that person's not in his office. Pick up the phone and say, well, he's not in his office. No. If a superintendent calls, you put him on hold, you get up, you walk over to that person's office and say, Ray Senior's on line 1 for you. That's what I want you guys to do. And that's what they do.
Yeah.
Because, again, normally when guys are calling into the shop because they need some sort of paperwork or something, it's because they need it right now. Whether it's inspection related, whether it's permit pulling related, it's normally something that they need right now. And it's very, very frustrating as a guy out in the field trying to get things done when you get blown off when you call the office.
It probably helps that you were in that position in your past life, and
it does
recognize what's important. How to run their business properly so that the super can do the work efficiently.
Well, yeah. And I mean, guys that have been project managers their whole life would probably argue with me that they're the most important person in a construction company. To me, again, Jim, I can go sell millions of dollars of work every year, but if I don't have somebody who wants to get up in the morning and go drive to that job and do it,
yeah,
where am I then?
Right.
So our focus at J Squared has always been from day one. Our field staff is the most important aspect of this company. That's why we brought in Dan Pinto years ago to do that, the full-blown safety training. We're now ISO 9000 certified. Our guys wear, the best hard hats. They wear the best visors, the best jerseys, the best boots. We change out our tools every year. They need to go home safely.
That's awesome. So going back in time when you were growing up, and let's say you're in high school, were you thinking I want to get in the construction industry, or how did it ever happen that you even got into the construction industry?
No, so I owned my first business when I was in high school. So I started detailing boats for a gentleman named Jim Wilkes at Wilkes Marine in Santa Ana. My dad and I went to the river since I was in diapers. And one of the things that my dad would always tell me is that we're not going down the road dirty. So he would take me to the river and pay for everything, but my job was to make sure that the motorhome and the boat was clean. So the motorhome and the boat, we were over at Wilkes one time, and one of his other customers had said, every time that thing's in here, it's clean. Who cleans it? And Jim said, well, I think Howard's kid does it. So that started a phone call to me when I was a sophomore in high school. And before I knew it, in the summertime, I would go surfing. And then on the way back, I would stop at Wilkes and I would detail boats. So by the time I got out of high school, the boat started with, well, now can you come over to my house and do the wife's Suburban, right? So I started my first business out of high school. I was doing auto detailing. And one of my biggest clients, or my biggest client, retail client anyway, was a company called Ayers Corporation, who was at the time the leading ATM installer in the nation. And this is when ATMs were first becoming a thing, long story short, Ayers ended up buying my company, utilizing my trucks and my guys to run an exterior maintenance program for the banks. And here I am today.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. But no, I think the only thing, Jim, I had ever done was, redid the back fence a couple times with my old man and, just your standard stuff, right, around the house that you do as a kid with your dad. But, no one in my family is in construction. But I loved it.
I know your dad. I know he's not in construction.
No. But I loved it. There's something about, there's something about the camaraderie and the goal of making that schedule on time. There's just, it's a feeling that's just hard to explain. I never really did it for, obviously I cared about who I worked for sure, and I think my name stayed pretty good. Obviously I don't know that we'd be here without it, but I always did it because if my name was associated with it, I wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, people walked away and knew that Jeff Clark worked hard. And so, I would do things like spend the night on the job site and, basically whatever it took to get it done. Some of it wasn't probably the smartest thing for me to be doing health-wise. But it was just failing, Jim, and not making a construction schedule date was just not something that I could get my head wrapped around. And we have that same attitude here.
Well, I know the company's motto is nothing's impossible. So, yep. And it's right there on the front door when you walk in the door. So,
and that's kind of where that came from. You came aboard right when we were doing that L3 project. And I'm sure you remember that thing. That was,
I remember doing a walk to the floor and being shocked at how clean it was.
Yeah. And I mean, that was, what was that? That was 180,000 square feet of TI that we did in 6.5 weeks. I mean, that's, I tell people that story.
It wasn't your typical TI. It was labs, chemical labs, and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah. We had, in fact, it started out, we had to detail or demo out what was there. And they had, I don't know if you remember me telling you, they had the crane that was in there that built the Scud missiles. So we had to take that crane out of there, and there's a whole bunch of top secret stuff in there that we had to get clearance of to go take out. And Ray Senior ran that one. Junior helped out, and then we ran 2 crews 7 days a week.
Cool. So, every company has their ups and downs. J Squared's been one of the fastest growing contractors in companies in Orange County. And, over the life of the company, has there been some things that, have been tricky or challenging times to get through?
Well, I would say the biggest one, my friend, you helped me with, which was, when we first started to talk, Jim, we were growing pretty fast and I couldn't secure any money. And I've told people this a lot, that, one of the smartest moves I think I've ever made was bringing you aboard, because I remember telling you that, I didn't graduate from college with a business degree. I'm a field guy. I can build, but the other part of it is just not who I am. And so we needed financing, and we needed somebody that could get our books to the point where I could take it to a bank. And I mean, I think within the first, I remember telling you, I think I said something to you about, if you can get me a line of credit, Jim, I'll follow you to the ends of the earth, or something like that. And you came back like 2 months later and said, okay, I got 4 banks. Take your pick,
Yeah, and it's not easy in the construction industry to get a loan. I can tell you
No. Well, I was striking out everywhere I went. I think, I attribute, and I mean this, and this isn't a pitch because I'm on your podcast. I've said this to numerous people, that, your relationships, especially with Chase in the beginning, was really the only reason we got it. I don't think we would have gotten it. In fact, I know we wouldn't have gotten it without you kind of being the guy in the background, where the bank's saying, okay, well, if Jim's doing your books, then this is going to look a whole lot better. I mean, I know Zabi at one point in time with Chase said basically that, I know Jim, so I can trust what's going on here.
Yeah, they know they're going to get the straight story from us. And
so that was a challenge. And then, as you know, Jim, we went from 10 million to 50 million overnight. The year that we had the incident, we were at 105 million in booked work. And then of course we had that terrible accident, and then COVID hit. So we've been, one point in time, I think, Jim, we had 104 employees. I don't want to ever get back to that again. The growth of that was impossible to manage. It was too hard to make sure that everything was getting done quality wise. So I'm happy with where we're at, right now. But it's been a tough couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I did the first podcast in the series about me, and, I've had my ups and downs of trying to do what I'm doing today, which, is kind of working and hopefully will continue to work. But, my thing was about being persistent and patient, because sometimes what you try to do doesn't really work as well as you think it would. And but if you got a good idea, or you think a company that you're building is going to be unique and successful, then you need to just stick with it, And I think that's a good story for J Squared, because, yeah, you had a little downtime there, but at the end of the day, you still have the same people and the same processes and the same mindset of, going in and getting stuff done. And that's super important.
It is. And I mean, I think we're almost back to the original staff that I had when you first came aboard, actually. And those people have never left, and they never even, Jim, during all of it, they never even mentioned that they were going to leave. It was almost like, if J Squared were to close the doors, we're going to stand here and turn the key, and then we're all going to go do something else. I mean, that was never on the table, of course, but it was the dedication and the way that my staff rallied around me during this time. I got to tell you, Jim, it meant the world to me. I mean, these are all talented people. They could go anywhere. And they haven't, and they're right here, and they're digging their heels in, and they're working hard. And some of our junior people, like Alex Hernandez, as an example, I mean, she's over here just absolutely murdering it. She's doing a great job.
That's great.
Getting herself into a project management role, and she had a couple babies, but during that process, she was going to project management school. So I just, I have an incredible group of people here, Jim, as you know, And it's not about me anymore. It's not this J squared is everyone else over here. And so when you've got that many people that are all striving and believe in what we're doing, good things are going to happen. It's pretty hard to stop a company like that.
No, that's the persistence and patience part. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I see it playing out, with you. So you just got to stick with it. And I know things are there's a bright future ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So, you've owned your own business now for like roughly 20 years. Is that around? When did you start J Squared?
Oh, no. Well,
just J Squared. You had your detailing.
Well, yeah, I had the detailing company for, let's see, from when I was 16 to 20, 21, right around there, my early 20s. And then I've been in the construction business ever since. And then I got myself licensed personally, I think in 97, Jim, I think. And then when I incorporated it, it was in 2007.
Okay.
But then I made it my primary income in 2014.
Okay.
So we're on year number 9 at J Squared right
now. So, the show is a little bit about helping other entrepreneurs think about starting their own business. What's the good part about owning your own business that you could share?
Well, wow, that's kind of a loaded question. I think that if you love what you're doing, then you can take that passion and you can share it with other people and bring in and build a company where your passion for what you do is the same as everybody else, which gives these people a really good life. And I've loved watching my staff grow as humans. People that came here that couldn't afford a house, now they're buying a house. People that came here, now they're married and they're having children, and you get to watch people that you care about grow as people and give them the tools and a roof to be the best person they can be. And that has been great to watch some of the younger new hires that we had, to see where they've grown at today. For me personally, obviously, your wealth is going to get better if the business is successful. So that allows you as a person to maybe live a life that you normally wouldn't be used to. But for me, Jim, it really has been, I'm just very proud of what I've built. I'm very proud of the people that are here. It's hard for me to put into words.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, I've done this is our 5th episode or so, and how many times it comes up, the best part of owning my own business is helping other people achieve their goals,
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same way a Blueprint is. The way I see it is, it's not about me, it's about my people and making sure that I provide them a career path where they can, achieve their financial goals, buy a house, have a family, whatever they want, that's up to them. But I think really interesting that it keeps coming up when I ask that question to entrepreneurs, that's the first thing that comes to mind,
Well, I think because I think, Jim, especially depending on, if you're in the service business as an example, and you've obviously worked somewhere or a number of different places where you've seen things that just you didn't agree with or you didn't like, or you saw maybe you were treated poorly, or your other folks in your office were treated poorly or disrespected. And I think it seems like a lot of people break off and start their own company because they get tired of being treated poorly. So they figure, I'm going to go do it better. right? And in order for me to do it better, I've got to bring people in, and I'm not going to treat them like that last person. I'm going to treat them the way they should be treated. Now, I've learned over the years that there's a fine line with that, Jim. You know, you can definitely give too much, which I've been known to do, and you can get taken advantage of through this. But through it all, you eventually find the people that have the same goals as you. And if you just give them the rope to go do what they need to do, hopefully they won't hang themselves with it.
Right.
And so far, knock on wood, nobody over here has hung themselves on it yet.
Right. So that's the good part of owning your own business. What's the worst part of owning your own business?
Everything else.
How about worried about making payroll and collecting your receivables?
So the worst part about owning this business is actually caring about your employees. I think if you didn't care about your employees, owning a business would be no big deal. You know, but when you when you wake up one night, Jim, and you realize that, you know, you have, let's call it 50 employees, okay? And you've got 50 families, kids, wives, grandparents, you know, who knows? But you've got 50 families depending on you every day to put your feet on the floor, go into the office, do whatever you need to do to make things happen. You know, if you do truly care about your people and things go bad, you're going to end up getting rid of things of your own possessions to make payroll or do whatever it is that you need to do. So the stress of that can be very hard on a lot of people. So there's a balance in all that. I wish I could tell you that I have found it. I haven't. You know, I lean a lot on, you know, my people for that. I don't hide the way J squareds, you know, if we're up or we're down, I don't hide that. I feel like, you know, the more my employees are aware of what's happening over here, the more they're going to understand why decisions are being made. So that helps with a little bit. But it's not easy being a business owner. And you find out pretty quickly, especially in the state of California, thank you, Gavin Newsom, that you don't have anybody to protect you. We're kind of all in this on our own. There's not a whole lot of laws out there that are protecting us, the business owner. And you learn that pretty quick.
It's not a business owner friendly state.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And so you just got to be honest with yourself on what you're willing to, how much are you willing to sacrifice for your people?
Yeah.
Because that's really what it is, Jim, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're the head of a family. It's no different than, you know, than a husband that's taking care of, you know, his wife and his kids. You know, it's especially back in the 50s, you know, when moms were still at home and things like that. A little different now, but it really is no different. You know, whether you've got 5 employees or you've got 150 employees, every one of those families is dependent on that paycheck. And you are the reason for that paycheck.
Right. So we, you know, a couple of years ago, we went through an unusual situation called COVID. How did that affect the construction industry?
Well, we were lucky in the fact, Jim, that COVID was the construction business was deemed a necessary business. So we had to keep going. However, it wasn't cheap. I mean, we spent a tremendous amount of money keeping up with the ever-changing laws that were coming out regarding masks and hand wash stations and isolation rooms. So every project that we were on, we had to go through, and I think we, on average, we ended up spending about $150,000 on PPE and masks and hand wash stations and all these things, plus training for the guys, temperature readers, all that kind of stuff. It didn't slow down the work that we were on and doing, but it did slow down, like everything. I mean, the whole economy shut down.
Yeah.
Right. So work that was in the pipeline or work that was going to happen, a lot of it did not. It was all shelved. And if you had ongoing work, you were okay. Getting new work was very difficult, because there was so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
And right about that time as well, we almost got a double whammy where, material has gone through the roof. And so we came out of the COVID thing into an environment where, a 2x4 was costing you $28 a stick. And so anything that you had priced prior to that, when you come back to the table to sit down on it again, if it was $10 million 6 months ago, the job was literally $16 million now. And so
owners weren't real receptive to that idea, I don't think, right?
No, they were not. They weren't. And, so you ended up having to either go back and grind down subcontractors or, figure out some sort of sliding scale on change orders. Because, I mean, literally, Jim, we would bid a job and the framer, as an example, would tell me that the wood number is $248,000 today. And by 8 o'clock the following morning, it was $350,000.
It's crazy. Yeah,
so,
I remember those times. Yeah, we kind of think about that, but
and look, the material cost, although it's starting to level out, Jim, it's still more expensive than it was. I mean, construction to build anything right now is 30% higher than it was pre-COVID.
Well,
but I don't think it's COVID that did it. But we're not here to have that conversation. So.
No, we won't get into that. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
another one we'll do.
One that I would love to be part of, by the way.
We'll do it. So, one thing entrepreneurs tend to do is work a lot of hours. How would you rate yourself on that? Do you have a life outside of business, or do you spend all your time at J Squared?
I would say I spend all my time at J Squared. When I first started, I literally was, for about the first 3.5, 4 years, Jim, I was in this office 7 days a week from probably 5 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night. I mean, I would get calls from Cindy Brown telling me to go home. So, you got to sacrifice a lot. And then, as an example, the office is shut down today for Easter, but I'm here.
Yeah.
There's always something for an owner to do. Now, as we've gotten bigger and I've put people in place, things get done that I don't need to do anymore. But at the end of the day, the only person that's really going to look after this place is me. So, that is one of the things as an entrepreneur, you've got to understand that, your days of working 8 hours a day are gone. Being a business owner is a 24/7 deal.
Yep.
And you have to be aware and you have to engage in what's going on every day, the good and the bad, because people are looking for leadership. When you take on that role, you take on a lot.
Yeah. So that's a good tip for entrepreneurs that are out there thinking about quitting their job and starting their own business, because it all sounds great, but it's a lot of pressure and a lot of time commitment.
Well, I can tell you, Jim, in my case, it was probably a pretty good factor on why I'm divorced. You know, I don't think myself or my ex-wife knew exactly what we were getting into. You know, we ran side work on the side for years and thought that it was basically going to be, kind of the same thing, right? Well, you find out pretty quickly that it's not. And the more you grow, the more employees you have, the more mouths you have to feed, the more stress. And until you can get to the point where, I don't think I took a paycheck for the first 2.5 years I worked here. I think I paid myself like $47,000 or something, just enough to make the minimum that the corporate world lets you do without things being suspicious. And, you have to learn, if you want to succeed, you have to be the person that can do without. And what I mean by that is, you're not going to be able to get a brand new BMW like the neighbors are getting. And you might not be able to go take that trip to Europe that all your friends are doing. And, you've got to realize that if you want to be successful, you've got to learn to do without for a while. But once you get there, you won't just go to Europe. You'll fly first class.
Right. That's good.
Right. And you'll go buy the biggest BMW, not the 525. So I think a lot of folks, they've got to realize, and there are exceptions, obviously, Jim, as we know, people start businesses and they sell some product or something and, they make millions right away. But if you're in the service business, like you and I, it takes time, you've got to generate clients and you've got to sacrifice. And if you're not willing to give up the expensive dinners or the this or the that, and your significant other isn't aware of the amount of time it's going to take that you're going to have to be away, you're going to miss birthdays, you're going to miss barbecues, it just, until you can get to the point where you've got some folks to help you, it's all on you.
Yeah. So one of the questions at the end I always ask is, we've been working together for a while prior to me even starting Blueprint. Mm-hmm. But you already kind of touched on Blueprint and how it helped you grow and by getting into financing. And I know there's, even beyond that, there's our weekly meetings when I used to work with you, and I know our new CFO, John Camus, is doing that, where he meets with you quite often. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you can share about how Blueprint has been supportive of you and helping you achieve your goals?
Oh, Jim, on so many levels. I don't know that I actually have the words to explain the amount of support that you guys give, and not just from, the whole bookkeeping aspect of it, right? But your belief in J Squared. I always felt like you were very honored to say that you were the CEO of J Squared, and the way that you would introduce us to your other clients and things like that. And John does the same thing. It's like, it's you guys, even though you're not under this roof every day, you can tell that it matters whether we succeed or not, and having that kind of support. And also, having somebody look after us too, I'm still doing what I promised you a long time ago. I still don't go out and make massive purchases unless it comes across you first.
I still have that signed declaration.
I know. And I
Jeffrey Clark will not do this or that. I can't remember what it said exactly.
Yeah. And as silly as that sounds, Jim, it was necessary and it was needed. There's, especially in a business that starts to become successful and you have money. And so if you don't have somebody that can kind of hold you back a little bit and sit down and explain why you can't do this right now, but we'll put this in place so you can, money would just fly out the door. I mean, that's human nature.
Yeah.
Now,
sure.
there are people out there, Jim, obviously, that, you know, maybe they don't have the expensive hobby that I have, right? So it may be a little bit different, but I think human nature in general is you spend what you have. And so, you know, when you came aboard and I was starting to have some success, you were very good at reining me back and saying, okay, Jeff, look, you can't do this anymore, bud, and this is why. And then you would show it to me. Boom, boom, boom. When we get to this month, we're going to be in trouble. So how about we roll this back? I'll put this thing in place and then you'll do it then. And it's a really good, for a guy like me, a blue collar hammer swinging type of guy, the value that you brought in to J Squared is way more, dude, than just the bookkeeping. It's almost like, it's kind of like you got somebody, I always know I got someone on my shoulder that's kind of looking out for what really matters, right? Which is, how does J Squared going to keep the doors open for the next 3 years? And without that, that nudge in the right direction, or the poke in the back, like, don't be an idiot, don't go spend all this, I think things would be a lot different around here. I really do. And I thank you for that. You know that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that, because that's what we're supposed to be doing with our clients is, you know, we start with accounting. So we're an accounting company, but really there's a hidden thing going on there, which is how are we going to make sure this company is stable and successful for, you know, for the long term? That's really our goal.
Yeah, Jim, I don't think that I would, if someone were to ask me what is Blueprint CFO, my first answer would not be they're an accounting firm. I would actually say that they're more of a business management firm. They're an executive business management firm. You know, they bring an educated white collar approach to blue collar guys like myself. I don't really think of you guys as accountants. I mean, I certainly don't look at John Camus as an accountant. I mean, John's off trying to get us business. That's a huge difference between you guys and a lot of people. I mean, yeah. you yourself have brought in clients for us.
We want to be.
That's why I go back to what I said earlier, Jim, was that it's always felt like you've been very proud to say, I'm the CEO of J Squared. And that's a great feeling for a guy like me. And it makes my staff feel good too. You know, nobody looks at John or looked at you like you were a hired gun. They all looked at you as you were part of this team, and what you said goes, and they respected it.
Right. I still have my J Squared email address, so
exactly.
I may be coming back.
I think you're still on our website too, actually.
Good. That's good.
I think.
Well, thanks for saying that, Jeff, because you know that makes my day, obviously. So, because that's what we're shooting to do for our clients, and you know,
well,
I think
always done
a good model of how we can work with an entrepreneur and help them. So,
well, you've always done it with me, and I know that I've turned on a few people to you. I don't know if you're still with them or not, but I know when you were, they were always very happy. So,
cool. So we're going to wrap this up. Is there any last minute tips you have for, you know, somebody out there that's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur?
I would say, honestly, do not do this without having a good CEO, because you can only take it so far. You got to have a guy like a Jim Downs or a John Camus to get through the financial aspects of it, because that's a whole nother world in itself. And that's something that you don't learn until you're stuck in it and feel like you don't have an out. So if you start to see some success, get somebody like a Blueprint CEO. And I would recommend these guys, obviously, but get somebody like that on your team in the beginning. It's worth it. It's worth the money.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's going to wrap our episode for today. Our next episode will be on April 28th, where we're going to have Mehdi Bandana of Best Framing in Costa Mesa as our guest. And I look forward to that. Mehdi's a relatively new client, but I think we're doing some cool things for him too. So, Jeff, thank you very much for being on the show today.
You bet. Anytime, my friend.
It was a lot of fun, as I knew it would be.
Yeah.
And so long, everybody. Onward and upward.
See you later.